Kane's brain whirled in his efforts to formulate some plan of action. For the first time during the whole search for the girl, he felt himself against a blank wall. This palace was a labyrinth, a maze in which he could decide no direction. The corridors seemed to run without plan or purpose. And how could he find Marilyn, prisoned as she doubtless was in one of the myriad chambers or cells? Or had she already passed over the borderline of life, or succumbed to the brutal torture lust of Nakari? He scarcely heard the ravings and mutterings of the dying man. "Stranger, do you indeed live, or are you but one of the ghosts which have haunted me of late, stealing through the darkness of my cell? Nay, you are flesh and blood, but you are a white savage, as Nakari's race are black savages. Eons ago, when your ancestors were defending their caves against the tiger and the mammoth, with crude spears of flint, the gold spires of my people split the stars. They are gone and forgotten, and the world is a waste of barbarians, white and black. Let me too pass as a dream that is forgotten in the mists of ages." That is from The Moon of Skulls, which is the story we are going to be talking about this week. Another Solomon Kane story, The Moon of Skulls, which was published in Weird Tales magazine in 1930. Solomon Kane and the Moon of Skulls. This is the next major story of Solomon Kane in this book, The Savage Tales of Solomon Kane. There were a couple things, well, there was one story published before this, after Red Shadows, which was a story called Rattle of Bones, which is a decent enough kind of horror story, which I will be talking about later when I talk about some random Solomon Kane stories. But it is just the Rattle of Bones is just a small, short, little horror story, even though it's a good one. The next thing in this book is The Castle of the Devil, which is just a fragment, which is only a few pages long. And it's a shame it was not finished because it has a very good beginning. Then there's another fragment called Death's Black Riders, which is only a couple pages. Again, it sounded like it would be a good story, but Robert E. Howard never finished it. So he had a couple false starts, it looks like, before he wrote The Moon of Skulls. The Moon of Skulls is a very kind of traditional Lost World story in the tradition of H. Rider Haggard, for example. There is nothing overtly supernatural in it, although the supernatural is suggested, which I will explain in a minute. Basically, in this story, Solomon Kane is in Africa once again. This time, he is searching for a young woman who was kidnapped when she was a younger girl and sold into slavery. Solomon Kane has taken up the mission to find her, as Solomon Kane does. Remember, he is the Puritan fanatic who believes it is his life's mission to right wrongs. This is his mission from God. So he has taken up this mission, which means nothing is going to stop him from carrying it out. Doesn't matter how long it takes. And in this one, again, much like in the last story, Red Shadows, this has taken a long, long time. Again, it's taken years for him to track down this girl. But eventually he does, and he tracks her all the way to a lost city in Africa, deep in the heart of a lost section of Africa, of which in Pulp Fiction there were many. In Pulp Fiction, Africa was just full of lost worlds and lost cities, like all over the place. And this is one of them. So in this lost city, there it's a pretty large city inhabited by native Africans. Solomon Kane rather boldly walks right into it and is immediately, they try to kill him. He narrowly escapes, but he does manage to barely escape with his life. He manages to get into the city and manages to find the chamber where this girl is kept. And so he finds her at long last, where she gives some of her history. And it turns out that she is being kept by the queen of this city, Nakari. The queen of this city is interesting because she is a powerful, powerful queen, native African. And she is very menacing, of course. She's evil, because she's the evil queen of this city. But she is a formidable character. Intelligent and ruthless, this character. And Solomon Kane gets himself captured, of course. And he is thrown into a prison cell where he meets the old fella who was muttering to himself in that little section that I told you about. This fella who's in the prison cell is a priest, and he is of an ancient priest caste in this city. He is directly descended from the ancient priests and of the race of people who originally created the city. So the city was originally built not by the native Africans, but by Atlanteans. Yes, this is a lost colony of Atlantis. This city was colonized and created before Atlantis and Mu sank beneath the waves. And the priest in his delirium, of course, tells Solomon Kane the whole story, the whole backstory of the city, and how it comes from Atlantis, and how the Atlanteans took native Africans as slaves. Eventually the slaves rebelled and took over the city. And the priest foretells terrible destruction for the current inhabitants of this city. Also, Solomon Kane manages to get away. He escapes. The fella here gives him some instructions about how to find his way to where the current inhabitants are going to sacrifice the girl whom Solomon Kane has been looking for, because of course she is going to be sacrificed in a ceremony, because that always happens, and it happens in this story. And Solomon Kane has to go save her. Much action and destruction ensues. It is suggested that a lot of the destruction is caused by the curse of this dying priest, but it doesn't actually out and out say that it is. That is the bare bones of this story. And you'll notice something if you've read any pulp fiction at all or any Lost World fiction at all, and that there is nothing at all original in this story. The basic plot of this story could have been written by anybody. So the plot itself is not great in The Moon of Skulls. It is one of the weaker Solomon Kane stories because of that. It could be one of the weakest stories in this book, but it is a longer story, and it's interesting on certain levels. It is a traditional Lost World story. You get the sense that Robert E. Howard has read quite a bit of that in the pulp magazines. He was very familiar with H. Rider Haggard, who was kind of the granddaddy of this kind of thing. H. Rider Haggard, who wrote She and the Alan Quatermain novels. Haggard's plots tended to be better than this one, but this one is lifted from Haggard and a bunch of other writers. As I said, nothing too original. The character of Nakari is interesting, though. Again, we see black Africans depicted in the very stereotypical fashion that they were in the old 1920s and early 30s pulp magazines. No surprise there, really. And they are just antagonists. There are no friends in this story. But Nakari is the evil queen, and she is very formidable. Robert E. Howard never depicted the Africans as less intelligent than the white people. Nakari seems pretty sharp, and she's dangerous because of that. She rose to power on her own initiative. She pretty much made herself queen of this city. So she's sort of an impressive character just for that. She does come to a bad end, as the villainous characters tend to do in this type of story. Solomon Kane does fulfill his mission. It's fun just watching Solomon Kane do his thing, although he seems less competent in this story than he does in the other stories. He kind of gets by with a little bit of luck here and there in this story. But again, he shows a lot of bravery and initiative and stamina, and it's always impressive how he will just go for years and years and years to fulfill his mission, which he does. So it's a decent enough action story. It's a decent enough Lost World story. But compared to Red Shadows that came before, and the stories that come afterwards, not the best. Not the best story in this volume. And one of the lesser Solomon Kane stories, and one of the lesser Robert E. Howard stories, actually. It's certainly worth reading. It's fun pulp, but nothing excellent. Next week, we're going to be getting to some excellent stuff. The next couple weeks are going to be really, really good as we tackle some excellent Solomon Kane stories with The Hills of the Dead and The Wings in the Night. So the next couple stories are going to be really, really good. This week's story, The Moon of Skulls, it's just decent. It's okay. So yeah, that was your Robert E. Howard show. The Robert E. Howard show for this week. Be sure to catch us next week as we continue the adventures of Solomon Kane. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.